Hello, everybody, and welcome to the cool down room for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. I am here, David, and I've got Bowser right above me here, and we are going to talk to you about they keep calling it the inaugural Las Vegas Grand Prix, but they forget that they did one in the car park, like a load of chavs at school.
Maybe they're trying to forget that one.
I mean, yeah, most people are, to be
Yeah,
fair.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no, interesting weekend as a whole. There's a lot of things that have happened. Let's not forget the ticket prices, for one, and the lack of running in FP1 and 2, and people being given £200 store vouchers to make up for the fact that they've paid £1,200 for a ticket that they saw 7 minutes of action.
Dollars, so it's not even quite £200 equivalent.
That's shocking. I've heard many drivers talk about it. Max Verstappen was very much eat the rich on his response. And yeah, I mean, Daniel Ricciardo, loads of other people all coming out about A, how expensive it is and that F1 shouldn't be for the super rich. We agree. And B, just how ridiculous F1 has treated these fans. It's very much got Belgium vibes again from when that race had nothing happen. But anyway,
Belgium as a whole is much cheaper. So
Belgium as a whole a lot cheaper. Like you could probably go to Belgium like 3-4 times in for the amount of one ticket to Las Vegas. So yeah, F1 sort it out. Also, just prepare your track properly as well, and we wouldn't have had these issues. Right, we're going to dive straight into it. Bowser, talk us through qualifying.
Thank you very much, Dave. So, we had a great start for Ferrari, in the sense of even after Sainz, he is representing already. So, Leclerc on pole, fantastic lap. He looked quick all Saturday, to be fair, so yeah, that was a great result for him. Sainz doing super well as well to get on the front row with him. Obviously, because of the very dubious penalty that he had to take, unfortunately, which I'm sure we'll get to in a little bit. He did make it to P2, but unfortunately wasn't able to start there. We'll come into that in a little bit. Then just running quickly through the rest of the grid, it was Verstappen, Russell, Gasly, and Alpine doing very well there. Albon and Sargent, possibly the standouts for me. Williams having an absolutely incredible Saturday, which technically in America was Friday, but we'll try and we'll say Saturday for the UK benefit. And then Bottas, Magnussen also doing very well, and Alonso probably a little bit disappointed, only getting 10th with some of the cars ahead of him. Then Hamilton probably very much more disappointed in 11th, followed by Perez, Hulkenberg, Stroll, Ricciardo, and then knocked out in Q1, unfortunately, it was both McLarens, Norris being 16th, Ocon way behind his teammate in 17th, Zhou in 18th, Piastri 19th, just could not get a lap together at all, and arguably the worst performance of the day. Obviously nothing personal against him, but Tsunoda nearly a second and a half off the back of Piastri, so I didn't actually see personally what happened there, whether it was traffic or anything, but there must have been something more to it than that, to be that far off the back of the grid. So yeah, and that was qualifying.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's a bit interesting there to see, Tsunoda that ridiculously far off. Again, I can't remember seeing anything, but it's probably just a case of Formula One refusing to show the AlphaTauris for some reason. I don't know why. Whenever they seem to do anything, we go, oh, let's look at a wall instead.
But they might get a bit more. They'll get a bit more next year when they're running the Spec 2 Red Bull car and probably third and fourth every race.
Well, yeah, maybe that's the whole point of it. Like, we actually need to get some advertising revenue. Maybe if we make the car a little bit better, then we'll do that. But a bit of a shocker for Yuki. Lando, I don't know how you feel about this, but I think Sergio Perez should have had a grid penalty. Lando himself said that he expected a penalty to be applied. Wasn't even looked into as far as I can see, which is mental. You stop a driver from getting a fast lap in, and then that driver goes out. Normally, that's a slam dunk penalty, grid drop because of it. So, really confused as to why this law does not apply to Red Bull.
Yeah, because Max did it as well in that with his fighting into turn one. Was it on Ocon again? Those two come into blows again.
Dives down inside of Ocon or something into turn.
Yeah, so I think it was Q2. It must have been. Ocon granted, kind of broke the gentleman's agreement, being that he overtook Max towards the end of the lap as they were both starting a fast lap, and then Max followed him through and threw it up the inside into turn 1, ruining pretty much both their laps. And yeah, we didn't hear anything more about it, so very, very confused on that one as well.
Red Bull seem to be just able to just, shyly just get these things swept under the rug at the moment.
Is Michael Massey back? I don't know. I feel like Michael Massey's back. So.
Well, do you know what? Mr. Mercedes, I'm going to talk about Mercedes right now, because one of the reasons, supposedly, that Carlos Sainz wasn't allowed to get his parts changed, even though they were damaged by the circuit and through nothing of Ferrari or Sainz is doing, was apparently Toto Wolff's protests. So,
really?
Yeah, apparently he was one of the main protesters against it that I've seen about. There probably was other people as well, but yeah, ridiculous that a Ferrari can be 1-2 and then the track kills your car and you have to replace other parts and you get penalised for it. Absolutely. It's something put in place to stop that, because that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a tricky one.
We were robbed of a four horse race for this race.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's a difficult one because obviously, from a sense of, if you have a look at it from Toto's point of view, they are desperately battling with Ferrari to keep that second place, which, let's be honest, is millions and millions of pounds. So, of course, from a business point of view, you're going to want to try and stop Ferrari from getting as many points this weekend. So, I don't blame him for doing it, but I agree with you. I don't think it's right in the sense of...
sporting, is it?
Exactly, yeah. It's one of those that yes, Sainz has had to change the allocation, and people might argue, well, you should have kept more in reserve to not have to take the penalty. But when it's so close to the end of the season, and I understand, obviously, laws can't be changed on a whim just to suit a certain team or a certain driver or anything like that, because also that's unfair. Abu Dhabi 21. You've got to look at it from a sense of, that is absolutely nothing to do with Carlos Sainz or Ferrari. The track has destroyed part of, the bulk of the car. It's
theoretically, it's the FIA have destroyed part of his car by not getting the track sorted properly.
Yeah, and that wasn't the only time that happened, because I think Ocon had a similar issue.
Ocon's car, I think, brought up the drain. And it hit Sainz.
Yeah, so I think it had a little bit of damage on the back of the floor as the front of it flicked it up, and then obviously left that sort of half hanging up for Sainz to completely collect it.
I heard the Sainz for a little bit afterwards couldn't feel his legs as well. So I mean, it was obviously a massive hit. I mean, it's going to hit your back, his spine, isn't it? So.
To be fair, these drivers are literally sat on the floor of the cars. There is very little space, and it's carbon fibre, so there's no give really. It's a big safety thing that even happened, and the fact that it damaged the survival cell of the car is,
it's ridiculous that they didn't allow him to fix all that without a penalty, in my opinion. But anyway. And to be fair, a lot of the other drivers, including competitors that are close to them and stuff, also said the same thing. Definitely something that F1 as a sport needs to look at going forward.
Yeah, but, it's like I said, it's yes, from a business point of view, you can see where Toto's coming from, but at the same time, you're setting a precedent that if that then happened to Mercedes next year when they're in a fight, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to try and to have no penalty for that, if you get what I mean. So I think sometimes in a sport like this, you need to play the gentleman's card and sort of have a bit of give and take with this stuff, because these things come around normally quite often. So yes, it's now set a precedent that anything like that happens needs to be dealt with the same way, and that's how it will be. And if that happens, then I'm Ferrari going to kick off if suddenly next year they decide to change the rule for a different team, for example. So
yeah, absolutely. But I'm glad you brought it back to Toto Wolff. So we're going to talk about Mercedes now. Lewis Hamilton. What happened to Lewis Hamilton? 11th place. I did not see that coming, especially behind the likes of Logan Sargent, Kevin Magnussen. Mercedes car was clearly there because George got 4th. So, what happened to Lewis?
That's a very good question. I had a quick look into it. I think he was running a slightly higher wing than George was on the setup, so slightly more downforce, as we found in the race as well, which again we'll get onto. What we saw with Perez, that obviously when you're not having any tow or anything, and DRS isn't up, that already really will really sort of hamper you down the really long Las Vegas strip straight and the following one towards the pit straight again. So yeah, whether it was sort of a setup issue that he had, just didn't quite get on top of it, or didn't quite get a clean lap, but yeah, it's a difficult one because he was super close to getting through, but you know, it's one of those. I think, you know, in a normal scenario, in a normal, well, and a lot of the other tracks, you wouldn't find people like Williams up there. So I think he just got caught up with some of the pace of some of the others over one lap. But I mean, you saw in the race, he had his various sort of adventures throughout the Grand Prix. But the way he was able to carve back through the field meant he had a quick car, so like and race trim. So whether he just set the car up, maybe even setup wise, more for the race than a one lap quali. So. Yeah, it's all up in the air at the minute, but I think don't take away from the fact that I think Georgia did an absolute super job on Saturday, getting the car there. They obviously, you could see from Brazil as well, they suffered on straight line speed, so to come back on a very high speed track and not be towards the back after that shocking showing in Brazil, I think is already a good step forward for them as well. Like I said, Lewis just got, I think, a bit unlucky in Q2, but on another day probably would have got through. Yeah.
It looks potentially like that was the case. The Williams obviously performing better than expected. Kevin Magnussen running the new Haas setup, I believe, and Hulkenberg running the old, so shows that clearly, considering Hulkenberg's normally the better qualifier, there is some benefit to their new setup. So a bit worrying though that again they're having to do that to work it out. Haas seem to have a history of doing this now, because they did the same thing with Grosjean and Magnussen before a few years ago. But yeah, I would say let's move on to Sergio Perez, but actually it's kind of usual for him not to be in Q3 nowadays. I hate to say it, but it doesn't seem to have the qualifying pace anymore. But yeah, I mean, he's behind Lewis. We're just saying that Lewis got caught out. Looks like maybe Sergio did the same. I don't think anyone thought Logan was going to make it to Q3, so that was a really good job by him. Obviously, that probably would have promoted Lewis up, but again, Valtteri Bottas seems to be on fire with qualifying recently. He seems to keep getting it up to the top end of it, but not being able to then convert it in the race, which is interesting that Alfa Romeo are clearly only good over one lap or two.
I think to be fair, you can always say that Bottas has always been a good qualifier. I mean, Lewis is by far, you know, he has over 100 pole positions. He is by far the best qualifier that the sport's ever had by a very long way. And Bottas, in his time at Mercedes, was, you know, compared to if you have a look at Max and Perez now, Bottas was never that far away, unless it was a rain-affected session for whatever reason. Bottas on a dry circuit in like-for-like machinery with Lewis was always very, very close on pretty much every track except for one of Lewis's absolutely exceptional ones like Texas, for example. But so yeah, it doesn't actually surprise me from Bottas. I think he's a very good qualifier. It's that race pace off the Alfa Romeo that I think's letting him down. The way they churn up the tyres and sort of the lack of sort of natural downforce that the car creates. Yet still seems to spend its tyres quicker than a lot of them as well. So it's kind of the worst of both worlds on that one. So yeah, and bring it back to Perez quickly. It's to say that he's been caught out, but this is the 9th time this season that he has not made Q3 in. Arguably, well, now he's secured P2 in the championship. Spoiler alert. That is actually now officially the most dominant car in F1 history. So to not be able to make Q3 in the most dominant car in F1 history, it's not the best stat to have on your resume, to be completely honest.
But speaking of stats not you want to have on your resume, let's bring it back to Charles Leclerc and his continuous run of qualifying and then not converting. But we're going to move on to the race now. Matt, we'll start with Ferrari. We'll do this the opposite way around to what we normally do, and we'll start with the top lot. And obviously, Max was the overall winner of the race.
And that's that covered.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's just pretend it doesn't happen anymore, really. First place, what's that?
We start with second. That's how we do it now.
So, I mean, it's pretty amazing race from Max again. I don't really know what to say more about him at this point. He had a few adventures. There's a few questionable decisions made. I still don't feel like George Russell deserved a penalty. I feel like, if anyway, it should have gone towards Max, but more likely was a racing incident, probably. Other than that, yeah, he drove a good race. I don't feel like he should have been allowed not to give the position back. It's something that the drivers have talked about before, that overtaking, and we talked about it before, looking back at Austin, getting past someone through what was technically not a legal move and then being able to keep the position and just take the penalty later on. It's just not right. Charles showed that he had the pace to close him down, and he, therefore showed he had the pace that he could have pulled away. Equally, Max probably shouldn't have started where he did in second. Carlos should have been there. Also, Max should have had a penalty for impeding. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, it's a few questionable things, but it doesn't take away from the fact, he did have a 5-second penalty. He took it as pit stop, and he still came back and he won the race. So
with damage on the front of his car.
Yeah, so well done, Max Verstappen. Yeah, there's nothing really more to be said. He's dominated the whole season. I just really hope he doesn't do it again next year. I'd like to have more conversations where I'm like, P1 was amazing at the end of the race, but yeah, well done, Max. Yeah,
it was a good fight towards the end though, between the three of them. Perez, I really thought once he got cleared Charles Leclerc, he was going to disappear off the road. Whether he tried to be too clever with doing what Carlos did and keep Max away by trying to sort of stay back and give Charles the DRS, I'm not 100% sure. They did mention it in commentary, but clearly did not work. And to be fair, on a massive long straight, like in Singapore, you don't actually, even the longest sort of DRS zone in Singapore, it's not really, it's long enough that if you're sort of 7 or 8 tenths up going into that section, that you will be able to keep the place, and even with DRS the car can't close behind. But on the massive long Las Vegas strip, it's too long. He tried to play that.
Anyone DRS in that track. No. Las Vegas is the second longest track on the calendar after Spa, and majority of it is that straight. Let's put it that way. So yeah, giving someone a tow down that whole way is not a clever idea. Whether or not that's what he was trying to do, I'm not sure. I do know, obviously, the Ferrari was eating up its tyres less this weekend than the Red Bull, which is the first time we've been able to say that this year. So it could just be that the tyres went out of the window and he started to drop off a little bit. I don't know. But what I will say is what an overtake on effectively the second to last corner, I believe it is, of the track on the last lap by Charles Leclerc to take second place. That was ballsy, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. Yeah, Ferrari. So Carlos Sainz, I think, finished 6th in the end. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Is correct.
His race was hampered from the beginning by being put into the mid-pack by the penalty. I think 6 isn't terrible. I do think I really would have expected him to get back up to 4th, just based on the pace we saw in quali. But we did have safety cars and things like that, which all threw it out of the mix. I think if it was a completely clean race, he probably would have got back up to 6th place. But not 6th, back up to 4th place. He finished 6th. But yeah, I mean, Charles Leclerc again, he's got that record of the most poles and not converting now, and he doesn't seem to be able to shake it. And Max Verstappen seems to absolutely love extending it for him. So Ferrari need to do something, because he's obviously got the 1 lap pace, and it's the car that's not able to go the distance, really. Hopefully they sort it out next year. I'm not hopeful. It's Ferrari. They'll come out next year with the 4th best car, knowing Ferrari, but I hope they prove me wrong. What do you think about all of Ferrari in this race?
So, like I said, going off the back of that, I heard the stat that Max Verstappen is the most successful driver off of somebody else, another single driver's pole positions. He now has, I think this makes it race win number 13 from a Charles Leclerc pole position, which is just a bonkers stat, to be completely, just absolutely mental. I think obviously it helps the fact that the two have been sort of jostling, but Ferrari have never really had the race pace, but have always had kind of quali pace consistently there most of the time. But Yeah, it's just a absolutely crazy stat. Yeah, Ferrari-wise, like I said, I agree with you there. I think the Science would have, without the safety cars, would have had a sort of smoother sort of cut through the field. Because I mean, I think him and Lewis were kind of cutting their way through the back sort of teams fairly quickly up until the end of the first safety car. So I think the two of them would have pretty much continued that up until they kind of reached their teammates, really. So if George hadn't had his excursion with Max as well, so yeah, safety cars causing a few sort of issues for those two breaking through because it kind of seemed to set them back again. But yeah, I think solid race from both, and like I said, with Ferrari's battle with Mercedes for second in the constructors title with only now 4 points between the two of them. So that really, that's probably going to be the biggest talking point / sort of fight within the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix next weekend. That and the race for 4th place in the drivers, which is between now 4 drivers after Charles Leclerc's good result. It'll be, I think that's between Lewis and you've got... No, Lewis is safe in 3rd, sorry. You've got 4th place Alonso, Charles Leclerc, Science, and somebody else. No, is it Russell? No, Russell's below that. But yeah, it's
Russell was in with an outside chance, but I think he's probably
after this one. I think, yeah,
now.
I'll grab the
Lando in there, maybe.
Yes, Lando. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So yeah, all of them battling for 4th place in Abu Dhabi. That'll be an interesting fight as well. So we're looking forward to that. But so yeah, like I said,
forget about Sergio Perez, by the way. I just want to throw it back to him. 3rd place for him. Didn't qualify well. Got into a mess in the first corner. Had a bit of damage. Had to stop early. Came all the way back through to finish 3rd. Yes, it is the most dominant car we've ever had, but still a great drive from him.
Yeah. And he looked like he was going to win it.
For getting second after all of that, and he lost it on the second to last corner. I think he finished 1,000th behind Charles by the line or something like that. It was something stupidly small.
About 1.7. 17 hundredths of a second. So
yeah. So I mean, fair play because he started outside of the points. He had to go pit early with damage, and he fought his way back through. Brilliant. He's doing what he needs to keep that Red Bull seat at the moment, I think. Which is not what I was saying a few races ago. Let's
doing enough.
Let's keep it in mind. A few races ago we were talking about he's got to go. Clearly he watched and was like, shit, I need to up my game because these two guys from England really are giving it to me. But yeah, I mean, finishing second in the championship is what Red Bull need. At the end of the day, that's all they need from him. I'm sure they would like it to be more comfortable than it has been, and to, have been less of a drama along the way. But
it's expensive as well, fixing the car.
Yeah, well, he can finish last next race. He doesn't have to worry about it because they're already second in the championship. No one can steal it from him now. I do wonder still if Red Bull is still thinking about the future and what to do with him. I don't think he's completely off the hook, but I think getting that P2 in the championship and this fight back this weekend with damage, which let's face it, wasn't really his fault for damage. He was just caught up in a mess at the wrong place at the wrong time. I think he did really good this weekend, and well played.
Yep.
Right, who's next? Ocon.
Yeah.
Alpine, a tale of two sessions really. Gasly qualified really well and then just didn't really show up in the race, and Ocon didn't qualify as well but did show up in the race. Some great overtakes. I thought they were going to take each other out at one point. Ocon ignoring team orders to stay behind Gasly at one point. Not
proved the right decision.
Team, is he? I mean, definitely proved to be the right team, but not making himself any friends, is he? Especially a team that Gasly seems to have come into, and everyone seems to be quite warm and friendly with him. And Ocon, who was already in the team, seems to have been a bit pushed to the side a bit, and maybe that was a bit of why he didn't obey those team orders. What do you think?
I think it's quite a simple one. It's difficult. The team are going to say what they've said, don't fight because they're worried about the two taking each other out, especially because both of them seem to be quite aggressive drivers. But But they knew that when they signed them, so it's kind of, you know, reap what you sow on that one. But like I said, if you are gonna ignore that, you know, that instruction, and you are going to sort of take things into your own hands, for God's sake, do something decent with it. And I know like, on many occasions we haven't said it, or we haven't been able to say it, but on this one, Ocon, fair play. 4th position for an Alpine is fantastic. Yes, I think some of the safety cars helped him sort of get through the pack, and likewise also I think caused Gasly issues the other way, similar to Sainz and Hamilton. But he's obviously done a great job there. He's managed to keep fourth place in a car that's probably on its best day the fifth best car on the grid, which, you know, then you're looking at 11th, 12th, you know, for that kind of thing. So absolutely amazing job by Ocon.
Yeah, for anything, isn't it, at this point? Because they kind of sat in a championship like limbo between Williams and Aston Martin, where they're too far away from one and too far ahead of the other.
Yeah, true, but it's and like you say, he's not making any friends ignoring sort of team orders, but at the same time, like I said, if you're going to produce a 4th place, suddenly everyone will be a lot friendlier and warmer with you, knowing that you can produce those kind of things when you're sort of released from your teammate and do all that. So do you know what? Fair play to Ocon. Like, I don't, you know, this is a team sport. At the end of the day, I feel like if your team give you an instruction, most of the time you should take it. But like I said, for God's sake, do something with it if you're not. And he did. Fair play, great job, and
you know
4th place.
I say that Alpine are in the middle of no man's land, but actually the two drivers themselves, after this race, Gasly's on 62 points and Ocon's on 58. So maybe in his head he's thinking, I want to catch Gasly and pass him by the end of the season. That little bit of competitiveness from their past, maybe playing a bit of in his mind there. It'd be interesting to see what happens at this last race. 6 points between them. So
French pride coming into it here.
who's going to be the top Frenchman?
Absolutely.
But yeah, okay. So moving on from Alpine, who had a bit of a mixed weekend, really, didn't they? Good quality with Gasly, no points. Good result with Ocon, not of a great quality, but yeah. Moving on from them to Mercedes, 7th and 8th. Probably would have expected 4th and 5th. I expected Sainz to be 4th, so I've expected 5th, 6th.
5th, 6th, yeah.
So, bit of an anomaly. I think the safety car did throw a bit of things into the air a bit. And I do think that George and his crash with Max really threw him out. He said in an interview that he thinks that stopping was the right thing, but that if they had decided to stay out, he thinks he could have finished higher up. He actually said 3rd in the interview. I don't think that would have been possible, but yeah. So maybe not the best strategy call, but at the end of the day, don't crash, then you don't get called in for these things.
It's a difficult one, because when you see the crash between George and Max, like we have briefly touched on it already, don't necessarily think the penalty was fair, which would have meant without that 5-second penalty, he would have finished 4th. So, you know, that would have, obviously, we wouldn't be having this conversation anyway. He did, I know obviously it looked like Max was the one that took the damage on the front wing and still managed to drive away and deal with it. But when I had watched a replay through of the crash, you know, on the tyres on the outside, it actually destroyed George's wheel rim. The solid wheel rim. So you could actually see the spokes behind it, which, can I just like slightly divert? It's absolutely criminal that F1 in these spec of cars have allowed the teams to put a flat cover over these tyres. Yes, they've gone for the sort of wider, like the lower profile tyres, which I didn't really like anyway that they were going to do that. But if they're going to do it, at least make it look cool with the spokes there. The fact they've got those solid covers that look like they're off a Nissan Micra from the 70s is just horrific. When the spokes look so cool on the low profile tyres. And then when George had that crash and it took off that thing, you saw how cool the cars could look with with the proper spoke. Anyway, I digress. But obviously with that damage,
he thinks that the removal of that cap actually helped with his performance in this car.
Oh wow!
Well,
I wasn't sure if he'd get a black and orange flag for sort of damage on the car. So I think that was part of the reason.
That's the thing. Like, it's
true. But then I don't know if any bits got caught back in the car, or either way. I think, or potentially worried about a any kind of slow punches or anything. So I think when the safety car came out pretty soon after that, and then they took the option to pit. He looked quick after that, so fair play to him. Like I said, he would have been fourth if it wasn't for that 5-second penalty that we've already discussed. We don't think he deserved. So I think it's a good race. I was very impressed with Russell actually today. He looked like he had the pace to. As Lewis was coming through the pack, he looked quick, and I thought Lewis had a good race. In the set, got caught out a couple of times by safety cars, but I think his race pace and being able to clear cars was very good. Sometimes you get stuck in the DRS train and you can't, but he managed to pick his timings and did that really well. But it looked like George was equally on pace this weekend, which I don't think he actually has been with Lewis probably most of the second half of the season, to be honest. So fair play to George turning it around, and I think having a much better weekend. Shame about the penalty, but I think Merckx would have been a bit higher up. And like I said, really, really happy that they seem to have solved the issue that I had in Brazil with the setup, with the really slow straight line speed as well, which was vitally important to get right on this circuit with how high speed it is. So promising signs from that going into Abu Dhabi, which is I know it's not a similar circuit in the sense of the walls aren't so close, but you do have two really long sort of straights in there as well, so that's interesting. So good, fair play to Mercedes on that one.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's good signs for the season to come as well. I mean, I think most teams by this point must have swapped over to next year's car, so hopefully they're learning from that. Just realising though, I completely missed another team before we got to Mercedes that we should have talked about.
I did wonder.
Martin, and do you know what it is? It's because I'm not used to seeing Lance Stroll in 5th place. What a race! Considering he qualified very poorly, to finish not only in the top 10 but ahead of his teammate Fernando Alonso. I know Fernando got caught up a little bit in the Turn 1 incident, but what a weekend. And yet another driver that a few weeks ago I was saying, he's rubbish, needs to go, and is clearly listening to me. And I am apparently the Formula 1 driver whisperer, is what I'm going to say now. Because every time I start slagging someone off, they start to perform. So if you're there, F1 teams, and you want me to come to your factory, let me know. But yeah, absolutely brilliant from Lance Stroll. I didn't really see any of it, because as far as I'm aware, they didn't really show any of it on the TV. He just suddenly was there. But yeah, brilliant.
Sometimes it's... Yeah, I think Ocon was a little bit the same as well, other than the little bit of argy-bargy with Gasly at the time. It's almost like you didn't really... There was so much else going on around from, like, I said, cars coming through, and then obviously the front three fighting, that, Ocon and Stroll, you barely saw any of, really, of their races, and they just kept out of trouble. And do you know what? Sometimes that's all it is. Consistency and staying out of trouble. And there you go. They've got some great points this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Much needed for Stroll's confidence, probably as well. Is it convenient that, as they've talked about a big chunk of Aston Martin being sold off, that suddenly Lance Stroll starts performing? Maybe he's thinking in the back of his mind, is my seat as secure anymore? But either way, great race. Double points finish for Aston. That hasn't happened as much as it should have this year, especially considering how dominant that car was at the start. Obviously not as dominant as the Red Bull, but still, he was Fernando Alonso racking up the podiums, and Lance Stroll wasn't necessarily pulling his weight. But this week, definitely done it. Fair play to him. Nice little haul of points.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to remember at the start of the season, Lance was coming back from an injury and only just made the first race of the season.
Who managed to race for a very long time.
He needs to injure himself more often. But no, like I said, fair play. And then that shoots us straight down to 9th place with Alonso, and like I said, plenty of dramas. 9th place, I don't think anyone would say is too bad when you're facing the wrong way at the end of after turn 1. So fair play for getting back and having to pit for damage and everything. Managed to get there. Obviously, safety cars helping, but fighting his way back through the field, and at least got some points, which would be good for good for Aston Martin. Yeah, it seems to be. I heard it was Lawrence Stroll that sold off a big chunk of his shares. So it'd be interesting to see what happens. I don't think Lance will have the lifelong peerage that he's had at the moment. So interesting to see what happens there.
But told his dad he's wanting out, and his dad's like, "Okay, I better start offering these shares now."
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see what happens.
Calling.
Yeah, we shall see. But yeah, it's just be interesting to see. I think that'll be something we need to keep an eye on, because it's strange for things like that to be moving before the end of the season. So it might be them setting something up for something to happen across the winter break. So we will keep our ears to the ground when it comes to that, and we'll bring you any news that we hear as and when in the off season. I think there might be some movements around there. With Aston Martin and sort of ownership and stuff, so or it might even be an opportunity for some of the other sort of teams like Rodin or anyone like that who was trying to start a brand new team. Maybe an opportunity for them to buy in to a team that's in a transition period as well. So we shall see. We don't know, but yeah, we'll keep you posted on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to see what happens, and if any news that's major that comes out over the winter break, we will endeavour to make a video to let you know, even if it's just one of us. Right, moving on not out quite, just to the end of the top 10. I'm getting ahead of myself today, I don't know why.
You are.
But we have...
You've got somewhere to be after this.
I'm thinking of my dinner, that's what it is.
There you go, yeah.
I'm thinking of my dinner. Sorry, just hit my mouth, I don't know what it was. Yeah, so, McLaren. Well, McLaren, how the mighty have fallen again. What happened this weekend? I mean, obviously Lando was impeded by Perez in qualifying. Still don't understand how that wasn't investigated, but I've talked about that already. I'm going to put that behind me. They're just nowhere this weekend. The pace just was not there. It looked like they were going to have pace and free practice, but it came to quali and just nothing. Yeah, I mean, Oscar Piastri got 10th in the end with 2 points because he got fastest lap, pitting very late in which to do so. I think they were holding out hope that there was going to be a late safety car and that they could finish a bit higher up, but they kind of didn't really, in my opinion, deserve points this weekend, McLaren, with just how shocking their quali was.
Yeah, it's a strange one. Like, obviously, Oscar had a bit of a shocker starting 19th on the grid in qualifying. I think with Lando getting blocked and impeded, you can kind of answer that one, but we didn't see anything from Piastri side of the grid, and and this was a new track for everyone, so you can't use that excuse anymore.
I mean,
whether it was a setup issue or whether they really pushed the car towards a race setup rather than quali, I'm not 100% sure. Don't know, but from 19th to 10th, not too bad. And like I said, if once that safety car came out, if the field was more spread, and the fact that he was running third for a while, until sort of Max started to catch them back up, and before he obviously had to pit for that change of tyres, Piastri with the wider field spread would have finished a bit higher. So
yeah, I think he did make a lot of points, a lot of positions up during the safety car period. I don't think he stopped, because I think he stopped earlier. So I think he made up a few places there. But yeah, he did well once he got up there to just kind of hold on to what he had and then just stick it out
when he was up there.
Enough to pit.
Yeah. Because I think he literally only pitted because he physically had to use a second sort of tyre compound. But, when he was up there, he was keeping touch with the front runners, which I think was quite impressive. He was relatively on pace with them. It was a disaster start to the weekend, but they showed pace towards the end. It's just a real shame that obviously Lando had that swapper and really early on in the race.
That was a horrific crash. He is out of the hospital. He is fine.
Yes.
But yeah, it looked almost like the car bottomed out and just lost it as a result. But
I think on those sort of leading up towards the Las Vegas Strip, there's a sort of a really high speed, full throttle, right round to the left. And if you have a look through the section, sort of the replays, he was a lot wider going in through that section. So whether he was looking for an overtake or whether he was sort of eyeing someone up, trying to put them off, but I think he just caught
as well, isn't there? I think.
Yeah, so there was a bit of bombing out, but also there's a lot of marbles already on the circuit for that point. So I think a combination of the two of that, I think the back started to... Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, yeah, sort of heavy cars. So I think, yeah, just got a bit of a swapper on. The back end started to go, corrected it and overcorrected it, and then yeah, it was. Well, yeah, those kind of speeds, he's probably travelling 160 mile an hour. Going round a corner at 160 mile an hour at that point. So I think, yeah, the car will go very, very quickly at that point. So yeah, it's a real shame. Like I said, most important thing, he's okay. That's the most, yeah, that's the best thing. Just a shame we didn't get to see what he could do in the race. But maybe next year. Maybe next year he'll come back and show us what he could have done.
We're here for 10 years now, so...
yes, we are. Yeah.
Much to the Las Vegas residents' dismay. So, moving on to the next team, which is Williams. And what on earth went wrong? Amazing qualifying. 5th and 6th for Albon and Logie Bear. And... yeah, just did not work out in the race. Logan dropped off very quickly in the race, and Albon just steadily just dropping back. He had a nice little train at one point with a few cars, and they all just went past him very quickly because of that long straight. Once you get into DRS, if you've got a train behind you, there's not much you can really do at that point. Great qualifying, but just did not have the race pace this week for Williams, which is a real shame because really thought this was going to be a good weekend for them to get some points and make sure they were nice and safe in the championship. I feel like they probably are at this point with only one race to go, unless something drastic happens at the front and we get a Daniel Ricciardo win. I don't think they're going to be caught now. But still, they could have really used just getting a few more points just to make that a bit more comfortable this week.
Yeah, I mean, definitely on a track that clearly suited them in qualifying. They'll be very disappointed not to score points. To have both cars up there. So, yeah, we'll see. I think it's AlphaTauri that are the closest to them. I think it's 6 or 8 points or something. So could have been a bit... could have used this weekend to get a little bit more comfortable, but like you say, I agree. I think barring a miracle, I think they're pretty much home and dry on that one. Albon finishing 12th, Sargent finishing 16th. I mean, Williams were always pretty slippy in a straight line, but their problem was it was the corners leading up to the long strip straight was allowing the other cars to get so close up behind them that they could basically slipstream until the DRS opened, and then they would, not even the slipperiest car in the world can, not world, but you know what I mean. The slippiest car on the grid can keep anyone behind with the DRS open on that massive long straights. Yeah. So, that was what it is. And shame for Williams. Could have been a good points haul after quali, but clearly just used the tyres too much. Wasn't enough left to get some decent points, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Do we feel like Logan Sargent has done enough to keep this Williams seat at this point? I'm very much still on the fence, and I still think it's more a case of I think he'll get the seat just because there's no one better around. I don't think they drop him to bring in a Schumacher. No. Felipe Drugovich, I've heard that he was beaten by the new I can't remember what they call it now. He's the reserve driver.
Development driver. Development driver.
Beaten by the development driver, apparently. If you listen to Nico Rosberg, which, do we take that with a pinch of salt? I don't know. But, so Jessica Hawkin apparently beating him in lap times. So would you then take him? Probably not. And then you start to look at it and you're going, well, who else have we got? You got Van Dorn, who was a reserve, who wasn't good enough for McLaren. Are you really going to want to put him in? Probably not, especially when he's been out of sport now for quite a while. So I think Logan Sargent is probably going to get that seat again next year, unless something happens with Perez. If Perez is kicked out of Red Bull and it's a case of you can help with the Williams project if you want to stay in Formula 1, he might take that and they might relish that, because I think that could be a good fit for Perez if he ends up out of Red Bull. Personally, I think that he'd rather retire if that happens than to go to a back marker, but you never know. Bottas has done it, so
Mm.
I think he will be there next year though, Logan Sargent. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think Logan will be there. He definitely has had an upturn in form, so I think there has shown some potential there. He's also cut out a lot of the mistakes he was having around the middle of the season as well. So, you got to give him some credit for that. He was only he's been outdone by Albon, but you've got to say Albon's been has driven absolutely fantastically this year, all season. So I don't think that's necessarily too much of a negative strike on him. It's more of a case of he's clearly shown progression throughout the year. I think they'll at least give him the first half of next season to at least prove himself, and once he's going back to some tracks in F1 that he's been to before, and sort of. He needs to show that he's going to be building on that the first half of next season. As long as he does that, I think he'll be okay. Otherwise, they will probably be looking at, seeing how the driver market moves from there on.
Yeah, as I say, it could be quite an interesting one next year. I think, is it next year or is it the year after where a lot of contracts are up? I feel like it might be the year after, actually, but there's still lots of talk around Red Bull and their driver program, so there could be some moves going on. Especially like if Stroll goes as well. His dad's starting to sell the business, so we shall see. Moving on to Haas.
Yes.
Again, not great. Qualified all right. Kevin Magnussen ended up finishing 13th. Nico Hulkenberg, DNF. Didn't really hear much about what happened to Nico Hulkenberg. He just seemed to 1 minute be there, next minute they was driven off the track and parked up, and they just kind of forgot about it after that on the TV coverage that I was watching. But not a great weekend for the Haas team, which is something I am getting far, far too fed up with saying. There's much lauded about upgrade, just brought nothing. They seem to be at a complete loss as to what they're doing with it, because we're now running two different setups, much like we did a few years ago at Silverstone, and it's not good. Haas needs to do something. Whether it's a personnel change, whether there's I don't want to see Gunter go. I think Gunter's great, but something is not gelling in that team at the moment.
Yeah, it's one of those. I really hope that all of these results and stuff are because they are just purely testing for next season, and it's a case of throwing various different bits of the car, seeing what sticks, seeing what works, see what doesn't, and then if they're going to come in next season with a strong, I think realistically the best we can hope for is a strong midfield car for them, but still that would be a vast improvement. Let's say Magnussen 9th and Hulkenberg 13th in quali, not too bad. I think they'd take that, but yeah, results 13th for Magnussen in the end, and Hulkenberg I think would have been sort of probably a couple of places below that until he obviously DNF'd out the race. We didn't hear anything about what caused that, and then it was strange because then the following lap Yuki had very similar at exactly the same point in the circuit. So
and
I wondered
a very good point at which for us to move on to AlphaTauri, who have also had a bit of a mare. Yuki Tsunoda qualifying 20th and effectively finishing in the very started, because Lando Norris and Nico Hulkenberg DNF'd. Obviously, Yuki DNF'd, but he was still at the back of the grid anyway. Not a great weekend for him, especially when you consider that there's obviously all talk about potentially fighting for Perez's seat. What I'd like to say in contrast is Danny Ricciardo had a great weekend, but he didn't, really. I hate to say it, because I'm a big Danny Ric fan, but didn't really do anything for me this weekend. He made it through to Q2, qualified 14th, and finished 14th in the end. A bit of an anonymous one for him and for AlphaTauri this weekend, which is a shame because Daniel Ricciardo had been wanting a race in Vegas for years, finally gets it and doesn't really get to show what he's made of there, by the looks of it. Whether or not it's a car thing or whether or not it's driver side, I don't really know. I'm leaning towards car, considering his teammate was also at the back. But yeah, not a great weekend for them either, really.
No, it's like we said. It's the opposite side of what we were saying earlier about these Hamiltons and Sciences being at the back. Alonso as well, being at the back and driving through, and Perez driving through the pack towards the front again. To drive up through the pack, there's got to be some going the other way, and unfortunately, these Haas and Williams, unfortunately as well, and AlphaTauri are those back markers, I suppose, if you want to unfortunately pop them in that category. Yeah, just didn't look like they had any kind of race pace this weekend. Whether it's the case of, they look strong in Mexico, so it's clearly that car can work in certain tracks. So whether it was track dependent on this occasion, I haven't seen them really. Sorry.
Lack of heat, maybe, because it's so cold.
Possibly they were one of those that work better on the higher temperatures potentially. Although I did wonder as well, because they haven't seen them do anything really on any of the street tracks this year. So maybe it's the bumps they can't handle, or any of the street sort of driving on the streets where it suffers the most. I'm not 100% sure, but just a potential theory. So yeah, I think they'll be very disappointed, but at the same time, it's not completely out of the blue. It's they are where they are, and like I said, I think there's going to be a lot of change in AlphaTauri. There'll be a new sort of title sponsor and name change for next year, which obviously doesn't bring anything performance-wise, but it might get them some more funding in if they've got a new title sponsor.
Red Bull parts though next year, so that should bring performance hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the main thing. Is they're going to be increasing their partnership with Red Bull. It'll be more of a. I don't know. I think for all these years they've tried to desperately, even though they've been a sister team, they've been desperately trying to sort of do it on their own kind of thing, and it just hasn't worked. So now they've kind of given up and sort of making the most of that. Affiliation with the main Red Bull team, especially with them doing so well now. So yeah, I think we'll see a much stronger outfit next year from that car, with the sort of sharing of information that they have up to what they're legally allowed to do between them and Red Bull, and hopefully we'll see people like Danny Rick and Tsunoda being able to realise a bit more of their potential and put themselves more in the window for Perez's seat at the end of next season. I think that'll be the case. I think
If
that's
Perez
what
doesn't start performing, of course, he may go up, and the Red Bull may give him a car that he can work with next year. So let's not entirely rule Perez out of his own seat. As long as he keeps it to the end of this year, then he's fully entitled that he might end up with it again at the end of next year. So
yeah, I think it's more a case of Max is so settled in that car that it's that Red Bull pool of drivers are all basically, the rest of them are all desperately fighting for that seat that Perez currently has. I think that's the kind of thing. I think you got to throw Liam Lawson in there as well. Him, Yuki, and Daniel at the minute, they're all sort of vying for that second Red Bull seat. So it'd be interesting to see.
My understanding is Liam Lawson has been promised a AlphaTauri seat for the year after next.
Yes.
So that means that Daniel Ricciardo or Yuki Tsunoda is going somewhere.
Yes.
So that is something for us to keep an eye on anyway.
Yes.
Right, our last team to talk about then is Alfa Romeo. What a shocker. Bottas from Q3 to 17th. Not a great weekend for him. Guan Yu Zhou, again, just didn't really show up this weekend. If you're driving an Alfa Romeo at the moment, you just got to be fed up with life, surely. It's not been a good run of races, really, for them.
No, I mean, it's weird. I'm just looking at the results as well, and Sargent was 50 seconds off the lead, and Bottas was the last of the finishing runners, 85 seconds off. So it's... I'm not sure if we missed anything at the end from Bottas, whether he just pulled up and didn't actually finish, or sort of had an issue right at the end. I'm not sure, but yeah, not the proudest day. I mean, Zhou, against, like I said, a very established and well-respected driver like Bottas as a teammate, he's beating him again. So fair play to Zhou, but that car really is suffering, and they need to. I think the sooner Audi come along and bring some proper backing and sort of technology behind that team, the better, really. But it's weird now. They've got another 2 seasons of limbo.
Seasons of Sauber, but there's also talk of Audi potentially pulling out. So
I heard that was Audi came out and squashed that. I heard
that's good to hear then, because I wasn't worried about what was going to happen with Sauber if that happened. I think definitely need something to happen to this team, because they're just floundering at the moment. They're just dropping like a rock. Yeah,
so the rumour is Alfa Romeo are going to back Haas now. So that's where their sort of backing will go. And like you say, it'll be... Like I said, I'm just worried for the next couple of years. It just seems like they're going into this sort of Sauber-own kind of limbo period while they wait for Audi to rock up with their new engine. So And Audi have obviously had the rumor is when it comes to the 2026 season, Mercedes are ahead of a few of the others in developing that engine. Apparently they're slightly further along the line and doing better sort of tests at the moment. But Audi have obviously had a lot of time so far. While others have been concentrating on the current format, Audi have been concentrating on that engine for a lot longer. So I think Audi will potentially in 2026 come in with a competitive engine, unlike what we saw when McLaren and Honda got together again. So it'll be interesting to see if
extra money that they can use towards that engine as well. Like I think there's obviously a budget cap, so I think because they're a new one coming in, they get extra allowance on it.
I think more to the point, Audi aren't a team at the minute, so they can chuck as much money as they want at that engine, and because they're not actually taking over Sauber until 26, and that's the point where their budget cap will start. They're not an active F1 team, so essentially at the minute they're just building an engine off their own back at the minute, obviously with the view of going into 2026, but as far as I can understand the rules at the moment, they can chuck as much money as they want at it up until basically the start of the 26 season. So, I think they'll come with a pretty competitive engine. I don't think they'll have the teething issues potentially, but I think all the teams will be because it's such a sort of big engine change. So I think even the established teams will have some of the similar teething issues when we start the season. But and I'm very excited for the 26 regulation change as well. It'll be a nice sort of mix up again. And a push towards sustainability as well, which is always going to be good for the sport as a whole and the longevity of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And must obviously mention as well recent news that Cadillac are apparently going to be making engines as well now. Hopefully that is enough now to get this Andretti thing across the line.
Yep.
There was a big talk. That was one of the things that Red Bull wanted, was them to have a works engine. So we shall see. But good news to hear that more people are looking to make engines for the sport. So yeah.
I think that engine's Cadillac are only going to be in 28 though. So Andretti, I think they're obviously the
of Renault, I believe. Whether or not Renault are going to honour it was questionable from what I heard. But
I think the FIA are allowed to
force them.
Force a team into doing it. So I think it's whoever services the least amount of teams, which would be Renault, with only Alpine at the moment. So yeah, it depends when Andretti come in. Obviously, they're prepping for. Obviously, they're not going to be in for 24, but they're prepping for 25. I think is the realistic look, but it might be 26. But I think they'd be quite desperate to get in 25. Because I think they would have
get in as soon as possible at this point.
Yeah, I think they would have gone in 24, but without the sort of trying to get through and it taking a long time to get approved up until the point where they're at the moment. So yeah, fingers crossed they'll be in as soon as possible.
We shall see. But yeah, so final thoughts on Las Vegas. I'm just going to do my little run through from the beginning. Far too expensive for what it is. I think Formula One have really shot themselves in the foot a little bit with some of the over the top, stopping people being able to look at the race from anywhere else in Las Vegas that they kind of went on as well. That seemed a bit ridiculous. But in general, what a race. Probably one of the better races we've had this year, which I did not see coming, to be quite frankly honest. So hopefully they're all that good, and which isn't just an anomaly. I was sat here earlier and I was thinking, this could be a good candidate for a sprint race. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree, actually. Yeah, I think I'm not sure how it'd work because obviously technically that was their race was Saturday night, Sunday morning for America, so that'd be Friday night, Friday morning for a potential sprint race. But I agree with you, actually. I think that that track, yeah, I think that it's got good multiple overtaking opportunities. So you've got obviously the turn one, there was a few dives into there, but then you also had at the end of the sort of, once you come out of that section, you've got the long left and then the long right and then the run down to turn 3. That's a DRS zone as well, so that gave a good opportunity to overtake. Then there's a little bit of a Mickey Mouse section around the sphere. Like I said, I thought that would look a lot better being a one continuous left. I hated that little chicane because it really broke. I get obviously it's good to have some slow speed and corners in there as well. I do understand that, but at the same time, I think it would have helped the track flow a lot more. Just having a continuous sort of long left-hander, then into sort of the push towards the right and then left, and then going left onto the strip. So Yeah, it's a bit of a Mickey Mouse chicane, and also helps spread out the field slightly more, which was a bit annoying. But yeah, then without that, I understand that would have been. I think there would have only been the one slow speed corner on the entire track, so I do understand why it was in there. So yeah, I think the sprint race would have been could be interesting for next year. I'll be very interested to see that, and I think I think, like I say, I got the same issue as you. They need to work on the logistics side of it. I think that's the biggest thing they need to concentrate on. But actually, they've built a good track. The facilities are world class as well. F1 actually own that piece of land where the permanent pit building is now, so that's there to stay, which is great. And obviously, they can use that facility.
They put 11 garages in it. That's what I want to know.
Do you know what? I actually had a quick count, and I think there was like 14 or 15. After the because obviously some are used by the FIA for the weighbridge and everything, so there's plenty of garages spare as well. So I suppose it's in case they want to run an endurance race or whatever, or some other categories. I think it's too bumpy for any motorbikes and MotoGP, but it could potentially be some sort of GT racing or something there in the future or anything. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. But yeah, I was very skeptical going into it. I thought it was going to be a lot of bravado and sort of a lot of
bravado.
Yeah, there was, but I was worried that there wasn't going to be
thing being in a limousine to take them to another place and then bring them back again. What was that about? That was ridiculous.
It's like basically it's like DC got lost and then they had to get a car to go and have the interview in front of the Bellagio, which was like, don't get me wrong, like it's very iconic.
They got paid for doing it in front of the Bellagio. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and it's like, but I didn't as well. It's so weird, like seeing their they had the interviews in front of there and they got driven back, but during that it was like, we're going to stop you as well because we're going to do a fountain show in the Bellagio. Like, I mean, I understand that obviously they want to bring Vegas into F1 circus and put their stamp on it. I understand that, and I'm sure the Bellagio paid a lot of money to have for that sort of moment, and advertising, but just didn't work in the fluidity of the weekend. And these drivers have just worked their arse off to get to drive that race, and then you're shipping them around like a zoo, like zoo animals, and put them out for display. And they had those interviews with no crowd around them really, just literally David Coulthard and the Bellagio Hotel and a load of water fountains, and then drove them back to where all their teams were again. That's very weird, very strange. I think they need to work on that for next season.
Yeah, it also meant they had to not let fans in or anything like that until they got back.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, logistically, there's definitely things to work on, but I think the race track is very good. As in, promotes good racing, and I also think that. Despite some of the other issues, it did throw up a good event, and there was enough substance in the race to justify most of the strange American bravado that they like throwing at it.
Miami, in my opinion, that race
better than Miami. I'd agree with you on that. Yeah. I think Miami has the potential to throw up a good race at some point. It just doesn't seem to have happened yet, but then we found that in Baku as well.
In my opinion, get rid of Miami, bring back Indianapolis.
I'd love that as well. I from an F1 purist point of view, yeah. I think Miami's got potential. Is just, again, they need to work a few bits out and that as well. But yeah, I think like I said, the Baku always had that potential to throw up great races. But the first one especially, I think everyone was so worried about hitting the castle and all of those sort of sections and stuff. Everyone drove really nicely and neatly, and there wasn't really anything that happened in the first Baku race. And then the second one was pure chaos, absolutely mental. And then we've had some epic races in Baku since. So I'm hoping it's one of those for Miami, and if Vegas is anything to go by on a similar thing, next year's just going to be absolutely nuts. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, fingers crossed that is the case. But yeah, I mean, I'm still really hoping as well that we get a race in Africa, South Africa.
Yeah, true.
That'd be really nice as well. But we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, so that brings us really to an end talking about Las Vegas. What are your thoughts on Abu Dhabi? You know, who's going to win?
I think we're beyond that question, David. Come on, let's go.
Yeah. Who's going to get second?
I think Charles Leclerc's come into some good form, so that could be interesting. I hope Mercedes are back. If they could stay out of trouble, then I think they'll be right up there. So that'll be interesting. I think
right now, I want you to give me a top 3 for.
You want a top 3 right now?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm a sensible man, so it's Max win. Then I'm gonna give Sainz second. I'm gonna give Sainz. Do you know what? I think without the issues he had with the with the drain covers around Vegas, I think he would have done much better. He obviously showed a lot of pace in the race, so I think he's got potential. I'm gonna say Sainz second and Leclerc third and Ferrari to beat Mercedes for second place in the constructors.
That as well. Okay. I think that we are going to have a Max Verstappen win with a Lando Norris second place.
Okay.
A Sergio Perez third place is my prediction.
Okay.
I hope I'm wrong. I hope we get something crazy. I think that Ferrari also are going to beat Mercedes as well. I just want to throw that out there. But I don't think we're going to see a Ferrari or a Mercedes on the podium. I think we're going to go back to what we were at a few weeks ago.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, cool. Awesome. All right, well, we will let you know when we will next be live for our league racing. We do have a Discord channel, the IVE Racing League Discord. I will put a link in the chat for you after the stream, so you can come and join us and keep an eye on when things are going to be. We'll do an announcement in there when the league race will be. Normally it's on Thursday nights, but we need to confirm some things due to my work schedule, so sorry about that. But yeah, other than that, we will see you next week for after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix.
Our season roundup finale.
Exactly. But